And we're live.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the 10th week of the Open Ag Learning Series. We're going to do introductions of those of us who are on video here, but first, for those that are new to the group, we're a group of scientists and researchers and engineers and advocates and farmers and ranchers and all sorts of people. We work on a variety of projects, but we all share the common interest of promoting regenerative agriculture, and specifically around how do we develop open source tools that can foster the transition to regenerative agriculture. So we started this learning series, and the idea is to generate this ongoing discussion, and we can identify common barriers and points of collaboration. And we're looking to kind of create some sort of umbrella group in the long run, some sort of association or cooperative of sorts, where we can develop, host, curate, and promote open exchange of agricultural tools, software, and data to accelerate the innovation and quantify the environmental services from regenerative agriculture. So I'm Amanda Ravenhill. I'm Executive Director of Project Drawdown. We're doing a big research project on climate solutions, including a whole slew of regenerative agriculture, forests, and food systems work. And we'll be releasing that data in an open source fashion sometime next year, and hope that it'll turn into decision-making tools and all sorts of helpful widgets and applications and products that'll help in the transition towards regenerative agriculture. And Abe, would you like to introduce yourself? And then we'll go on to Dorn, Van, and then Peter.
Sure, I'm Abe Collins. I'm a cattle grazer and work with other producers and folks working on getting their soil improved and growing more grass and so forth. I'm a board member of the Grass-Fed Exchange and of the Soil Carbon Coalition, and we have a new company called Landstream, which works with Sense landscapes and decision support tools.
Great. My name is Dorn Cox. I'm also a farmer and Executive Director of Green Start and Board President of FarmHack, and involved with the FarmOS project.
My name is Van Patterson.
You're on my mic. Yeah.
I just joined Peter Byck at Carbon Nation. I'm a recent ASU graduate of full sustainability, so pretty excited.
Awesome. Should I just roll in?
If you could just give us a brief intro. Our presentation today is Peter Byck, and then I'll just give a couple more points of context, and then you can roll right in.
All right, so my name is Peter Byck. I'm a filmmaker and a professor of practice at Arizona State University at the Schools of Sustainability and the Schools of Journalism. And the last fellow you just heard is Van. He is actually a student of mine this last semester, and so it's really exciting to bring him into Carbon Nation as we're growing. And we'll get into much more in a bit.
Excellent. Excellent. So yeah, I just want to point out that people can see the archived presentations from the last 9 weeks at this website, openagriculture.weebly.com, and you can read more about our group there. And there's a lot of different definitions of regenerative agriculture that are being thrown around, but I'll just say one of the ones I appreciate the most, and that this group is trying to kind of get our heads around and decide on collectively is one from Rodale. And it says that regenerative agriculture is a long-term, holistic design that attempts to grow as much food using as few resources as possible in a way that revitalizes the soil rather than depleting it, while offering a solution to carbon sequestration. I think it's good to kind of understand what we mean when we throw around these terms. So that's at least one definition for understanding what it is. And with that, I'll let Peter take it from here.
Awesome. I like that definition. I like for myself to have that carbon piece put in there. I was surprised by it.
Yeah.
A lot of people are dancing around that, or just not interested in that, but they're interested in great watersheds and things like that. The reason I've been asked to speak today is a project that we're developing here at ASU with a lot of other universities, which is called the ASU Soil Carbon Nation Research Proposal. And really, the evolution of this work is when I was making Soil Carbon Cowboys, which is a short 12-minute film that I don't know if you want to put the link up there for this as well, for folks who haven't seen it yet. But it focuses on three farmer ranchers, Alan Williams, Gabe Brown, and Neil Dennis. And as I was researching the film and then filming and then doing the editing, I had a lot of questions because I wanted to know that carbon was being stored in the ground. I started this whole journey with John Byck and at the Marin Carbon Project and the work that Wendy Silver's doing, doing a core sample a meter down and measuring how much carbon's staying there and in what place is it staying. Is it the labile area that's just cycling? Is it the sort of the mid-level that's decades it'll stay in there? Or is it the deeper level that's going to stay for centuries or even millennia? So we want to figure out who's measuring that, who's doing the comparison between what we're calling adaptive multi-paddock grazing, AMP grazing, and conventional grazing. And so that started me down a path. Actually, Alan Williams was the first person in that line. And then quickly I met a guy named Richard Teague, who is at Texas A&M, who's done about the only ranch-scale comparison between AMP grazing and continuous grazing, conventional grazing. And in his paper, he discovered over the 10 years that the AMP grazing was sequestering 3 tons of carbon more per hectare per year over that 10-year time than the conventional continuous grazing. And that's about the only paper we've got. As I was reaching out to different scientists, I was meeting folks who were focusing on bugs, the soil microbiome, mycorrhizal fungi, the bacteria-fungi ratio. I was meeting people who were working on the greenhouse gas emissions from these systems, the carbon dioxide, the methane, the nitrous oxide. People very interested in the water infiltration, the water retention of these systems. And really what it was turning into, the wildlife that's coming back to these ranches, the birds that are coming back to these ranches. And I met all these scientists, and all of them were very excited by what was happening on ranches like Gabe Brown's and Neil Dennis's. And they were at their different universities or agencies, and they all were marginalized. They all were sort of put aside and not really given a lot of love for their thoughts about studying on these ranches and these new ways of grazing. And we got a small grant from the Walton family here at ASU, and we brought everybody out in January of 2014. We sat around a table, and for the first time in a lot of their careers, these folks hadn't really sat around a table where everyone was in agreement with them on what they wanted to study. There'd been a lot of conflict for them. And it was really exciting, and a team formed. And then we got another grant from the Thornburg Foundation this past November, and we met actually at the table I'm sitting at right now. And we've really honed in what we want to study and how we want to study it and where we want to study basically the whole system at ranch scale, comparing adaptive multi-paddock grazing with conventional grazing. So that's the big overview. We actually just finished a short film just Sunday called Soil Carbon Curious, and it's about the scientists who are on our team and why they want to do this and why they want to do this work. So that's just out, just brand new. So I wanted to go through our team roster. So let me go ahead and share screen here, or screen share, as it were.
And that's Soil Carbon Curious. That's not available yet, is it?
It is. It's up and good to go.
Okay. And where can we find it?
It's on. Just Google it. It should show up. I actually haven't Googled it yet. It's on Vimeo. It's on our. Does it come up yet? I haven't even.
It's not showing up right away.
Okay.
But I'll find it.
Link out.
Excellent.
So when we're talking about which regions we want to do this work, these are the 4 regions that we've highlighted as the regions that would have the most. Hold on one sec. I think you just hit your audience. It should show up. I actually haven't Googled it yet. It's on Vimeo. It's on our. Oh, weird. I'm getting an echo of what I've already said like minutes ago. Is that happening to anybody else? Link out.
Maybe someone has the video player up as well as the live broadcast.
These are the 4 regions that we've highlighted in the region.
All right.
That would have. There you go. It was David, our good friend David Johnson, on our team.
Let's have him join again and just
with mute.
close out the other one. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, so the regions we're looking at, this one up here in the Dakotas, up here in the upper Midwest, the Southeast, and then the Texas-Oklahoma region. So that's where we think we're going to get the more bang for our buck with the carbon accrual as we measure the different types of ranching systems. And then I wanted to talk about the team itself. So this is our team, and you know, I want to stay focused. I want to be helpful with what we're working on here. You know, the barriers so far for us, there's a lot of skepticism that ranchers can sequester a lot of carbon in their soil. There's a lot of papers that have been put out about soil carbon, but to my research in our teams, a lot of those papers don't measure a meter down. They measure just 20 centimeters or 30 centimeters down, and there's a lot more carbon being stored below that. So that's why we think that that's important, and that comes directly from being influenced by Wendy Silver and her work with John Byck. And those are kind of the biggest. You know, there's folks who have a feeling about Alan Savory, and so there's folks that have a strong feeling against him, and so we've come up with that. That's almost like clockwork when we present to people that will come up, and then we discuss it and we say, you know, we're starting the science. This is a gap. We need to fill this gap for science to see if this is all happening in the way that folks are seeing it happen on the ranches and farms. So our board of advisors, I'll just go through quickly. Phil Christensen's actually an expert on Mars. He's here at ASU. Christian Davies is a colleague at Shell. He's an environmental scientist. I'll just go through these. Those are all the advisors, but really it's the team. So Richard Teague is our principal investigator. He's out of Texas A&M. I highly recommend looking him up and meeting him. He's an awesome educator. He's teaching me a ton about rangeland. The next guy down is Alan Williams, who actually is a consultant. He has his own ranch farm in Mississippi, but he consults hundreds of people on this type of grazing. And I've been out filming with him in Georgia a couple weeks ago, and it was inspiring because there was one person who had a farm in their family for 3 generations, and they were trying adaptive multipaddock grazing for the first time. And just by not, and it was year 1 that I was filming him. And just by not mowing his lawn, just mowing his field, he was seeing plants he'd never seen before. He was seeing insects he had never seen before. And the biting insects that really bugged him before, his son was saying that he's not even getting bit as much because of the predation that was happening just from not mowing it once and letting it grow for 2 months. So that was fascinating. So I'm out in the field with Alan, and it's great. Jason Roundtree, I mentioned, is working on our greenhouse gas stuff. He's also a rangeland specialist. He's a genetics specialist. Steve Applebaum is he's working on the soil carbon and the field measurements. He's an ecologist, a botanist. If you ever get the chance to walk through any place on Earth that has plants growing with Steve, take it, because it's just a very fun time. Russ Conser. So I could get into a little bit of our work with Shell, but Russ used to run a part of Shell called Shell Game Changer, and he and I met about a little over 2 years ago, where I said to him, "Are you familiar with grass-finished beef?" And he said, "I eat it for my health. My dad just passed with Alzheimer's, and I've really studied health." And I said, "Are you familiar with rotational grazing?" He said, "I was just in the front row of Alan Savory's TED Talk." As I said, this was 2 years ago. I said, "Have you thought about the implications of that on your business, the carbon in the ground?" And he said, "Let's talk." And he and I become friends. We've been friends ever since. And so that project is called Project Meadowlark. We got a grant from Shell to study different business models where the businesses are benefiting from more carbon going into the soil. And that's led us to develop 20 business models that we've been pitching out to Shell. And now we're working on something very ambitious. It's a pilot program where we sequester 1 million tons of CO2 per year for a 3-year period. And then we times 10 that to 10 million tons per year for the second 3 years. And then we times 10 that to 100 million tons of CO2 sequestered annually for the third 3 years, for years 7, 8, and 9. So we're working on that pilot right now. We think that for those first 3 years, that carbon's already being stored on ranches around the U.S., and we want to count it, and we want to quantify it, and we want to prove it. And because we want to show how the whole system is part of that carbon accrual, we have this whole system science program that we're proposing, and that would be part of this 1 million tons pilot project that we're working on right now with Shell Game Changer. We hope Shell comes on board, and we hope to bring other companies on board as well. It's kind of a new way of thinking about how do we get this science done, and how do we make it a business opportunity. And so our proponent at Shell Game Changer is a fellow named Hank Mouvier, and this came out of his brain, and we're running with it, and it's happening now. We're going to meet in an hour to keep building this pilot. So that's what happened when I met Russ Conser, all that. Jenny Hodbod is here at ASU as a postdoc, and she's one of our social scientists that'll be looking at how are the ranchers doing compared to their neighbors who are doing conventional systems. How are they doing emotionally, health-wise, financially, to really dig in as far as deep as the ranchers will let us. And this is where I think my filmmaking can come into play, so that people understand that we're there to celebrate them, and we're not there to cut them down, and that maybe we'll get lucky and they'll be open with us so that we can do that comparative study as well. Christine Jones, I'm sure everybody knows, down in Australia. She's been at the forefront of soil carbon for well over 10 years. She's on our team. David Johnson, who I hope is back on, he's working on the carbon sequestration and also the microbial biodiversity, and specifically about that fungal and bacteria ratio. He's doing work that I've never seen before. The first time I spoke to David, I'd read a paper of his, I guess this was 2 years ago in August, and I read his paper and I called him immediately. We were on the phone for 2 hours. Just incredibly inspiring work that he's doing. And then we've got Urs Kluter, who's also at Texas A&M with Richard, and he and Jenny are our social scientists. And he's also an economist, or he certainly studies the economics. And then Michael Lehman is at the USDA ARS lab, and he's going to be working on the microbial work as well. We have Jonathan Lundgren, who is our bug guy, and Jonathan's pretty well known for saying that when we kill bugs, when we use pesticides, it's a broad spectrum, and for every bad bug we're killing, there's 1,600 good ones that we're killing as well. And his theories are, if you do good balance with the forage and the soil life, the bug life, the predation will start taking care of itself. So we want to see how that's working on these ranches. Becca Riles, let's see, I believe is just married and is moving from Brown University to the University of Hawaii. She came out of Wendy Silver's lab with the marine carbon work, and she's also focusing on the greenhouse gases with us. And then Wendy Tahari is, she's got her own company. She was at USDA ARS, and she's focusing specifically on the mycorrhizal, that whole system in there. So that's the team, and those are the pieces of the puzzle that we're looking to discover. And again, right now we're looking in these regions, and this region number 1 is going to go up into Canada, so we can get Neil Dennis in there. And so yeah, so that's what we're working on. I'm going to go ahead and move off of screen share and open up to, I get to see David Johnson. And hey, buddy. And why don't we open it up to questions, because I'd love to get people's input. This is a smart group here. If there are any questions. Let's see.
I think that's Abe. Are you gonna jump in?
I was just opening up for the possibility. Shoot, Dorn.
No, I always have questions, but go for it, Abe.
Peter, congratulations on advances with the multi-ranch research and so forth. I understand, I think Russ had mentioned that you'll be having a table at the Grass-Fed Exchange Conference in the fall, looking for ranchers to sign up. So it sounds to me like you're in expansion mode, which is great news.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
And one of the questions I've talked about with Richard and other people before is, are you going to be doing a lot of this plot and sampling establishment with an eye toward tracking change over the time, or are you focusing mostly on the snapshot across the fence kind of comparison to look at the last, say, decade of achievement?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't explain that. What we're doing is, as Abe said, we're doing a snapshot. So we're only going to measure on ranches that have been doing whatever they've been doing for the last 10 years or more. And that's a broad spectrum right there, just to find folks who are doing adaptive multi-paddock grazing. What do you mean by that? I mean, when our science team met, we had a whole 4-hour session just trying to figure out what that means. So there's a lot of work just in defining that. So we're going to compare as close as across the fence line as we can, the AMP grazing and the continuous grazing. And we are using the fact that they've been doing it for 10 years. So what Abe's just asked is, are we going to continue measuring as we set up these ranches and we get to know these ranchers? Can we keep measuring down the line? And that is something that I would love to do, and that is one of the most exciting reasons that this open ag work and what Dorn's doing. I think this is where the team here that I'm talking with right now could help us. You know, what are the inexpensive ways to do that measurement? How do you keep stuff out in the field that cows don't stomp on? You know, just a million questions of how to continue that. What satellites that are up from NASA, like SMAP and other satellites, could we coordinate with to, you know, get our data up against their data and start making models that work, and how do we populate bigger models like Dacent and the Century model? And Dorn and I have started talking, how do we create a game with all of that data? And how do we make all that data available for everyone? There's a bit of tension in the let us analyze it first before we send the data up, versus just sending the data up. Abe, you and I were talking about that in February, and I don't think our team's come to a conclusion on that yet. But I can tell you that we want to share everything. It's just going to be maybe a bit of timing so that the scientists can write the papers and get them published. And that publishing piece is going to be a big. You talk about barrier. Getting in through that publishing world with this kind of work has proven very difficult so far. That said, there's an editor at Nature magazine who is looking at starting nature sustainability, like a whole new part of the nature world. And she was out here, and I really enjoyed meeting her. And she's reading our first paper that we're trying to get published that Richard's the lead author on. And so fingers crossed, because that might be a huge new path for our knowledge to get out there. Did I answer your question, Abe?
Pretty much, you're establishing the snapshot and hopeful for change over time.
Yeah.
Track. And I guess another just follow-on question to that is the feedback to the land managers, because I think the old model is we do research and we tell you what we found, and another option is we monitor and we provide that as feedback, and that actually accelerates the possibility of people making the small and large adjustments on the fly that'll give you the results you're looking for.
I think that's fantastic advice. Think about it. If you're starting to get feedback and you see what you're doing is doing all this work, you're going to be inspired to do it even more. That's what I'm hearing you say, and I like that feedback quite a bit. It's a great point.
Great.
So Dorn, you and I have been talking about the open source data collection, how to collect data cheaply, how to get as broad as possible, and you and I have talked about how we at Carbonation want to help that along, help this all along. Do you want to? I mean, every time I talk to you, I feel like I've forgotten half the stuff I learned before, and I need to learn more. How do you see, like citizen science fitting into the research that we're talking about? Can it fit in, and down that road?
Well, I mean, I think sort of the direction you were just heading with Abe's question is right on. Is that that we don't have this in adaptive management, that it's not just about environmental models that are providing feedback for scientists, but it's taking it to the next step and creating management plans and providing feedback to the farmers themselves and getting it into usable forms. So I think it's, as you mentioned, we're lowering the cost of collection, but also providing incentives on the ground for collecting that data that will provide, as the kind of thing that Abe's going to present on is providing immediate management feedback on paddock condition and so forth. And the kind of population, the kinds of things that you're looking at is insect indicators for health, plant health indicators that are low cost and very rapid, but then also creating the system that you're talking about with the scientists studying that and bringing it in and providing feedback to these larger picture environmental models. So it's a complex social system that we're working on developing here, but very exciting. And so that's where, I think that's what's exciting about this conversation is working out the software social interfaces that we're developing so that we have the tools and the culture that's reflected in our system supported by the kinds of communication software that's now available. So that's, I think that's the exciting part. And as you said, we've been chatting about we have the audience, you have the scientific audience, we have the land manager audience, but then you're also looking at the general public audience and those involving a much larger group of people in a conversation about regenerative agriculture and the importance of soil health. And that's where I think sort of the gaming has an effect for sort of land management planning and running different scenarios, but also giving an opportunity for more people to play with these different variables and get a sense of how these systems work.
I just heard a statistic. Hold on a second. I'm going to remember his name. He's the head of the Organic Consumers Association. Anyway, he said last year, or no, it was this guy named Andre Liu, who's out of Australia. He said that last year, the number of farmers in the U.S. ticked up for the first time in a long time. Have you heard that?
It's certainly regionally correct, and we're seeing more smaller farms, especially in New England, and I think that's the case nationally as well. Is that we are seeing some movement towards younger generation of farmers getting in, and more women farmers especially is actually in our region. That's been the growth area.
Yeah, it's tremendous. And so. So when you were talking about, our messaging to the general public, what we found with Soil Carbon Cowboys it's worked along the whole spectrum, which kind of comes back to one of my theories is that if you make a film, you want your film to work for everybody anyway. I don't know too many filmmakers who have a specific audience that they're going for when they want everyone to see their films. So. Basically, if we keep finding good, entertaining ranchers, it's going to help us quite a bit. And I just filmed Will Harris down in Georgia, and he fits that bill. We're logging the footage just right over there, and he's awesome. So that'll be our next film if I can get my editor free. And so we're thinking that our short films especially will reach the general audience and reach policymakers too. I mean, we really want to be reaching everybody. The whole policy piece around carbon is so, it's like carbon's negative right now. It's not, soil carbon's not even zero, you know, and so the getting policy folks to believe that soil carbon's an option comes right back to the gap in the science. I mean, for us, it just keeps coming back to that, which is why we are focused on that. Because we want to answer these questions so that we can say, hey, guess what? It's real. It's an option for you. You know, the EPA put out a year ago comments for this thing called Rule 111D, which is where they're trying to reduce the greenhouse gases from the grid, from the power generation. And it's mainly to bring down coal emissions. But they let every state decide on how they want to approach it, which I thought was a great idea. And we were figuring out, you know, how many hectares you needed of AMP grazing to mitigate each state's, you know, coal output. And then I found out that it says specifically you cannot use soil carbon to mitigate your greenhouse gas emissions from your power grid production. Like it's like negative. And so we've got to get through that. So there's a barrier to the original questions that you gave us, Amanda. That's a big barrier. The policy space. Again, we think we can be helpful to get some data, and the reason we're doing the snapshot is to get the data as quickly as possible. And those are our reasons for all that.
So I guess I'd love to hear, Peter, about your vision again for the citizen science piece of this and being able to involve the ranchers in this feedback process, because I think that there's a great opportunity there with this project, and whether there you know, a number of the other presenters in this series have talked about a number of their tools that are helping to move those initiatives along, both on the sort of the consumer awareness of products and you know, I'm thinking specifically things like field to market and soil health labeling regimes, and likewise I'd love to hear from Amanda, you know, from her perspective, linking that general awareness back down to the ranching process, and that, you know, the product is more than just the calories coming off that farm, and not in terms of, you know, just, you know, not just talking about ecosystem services, but just general involvement in that agricultural process.
I'll just take a little bit of that, and then I'll hand over to Amanda. Quite frankly, the citizen science piece of our big research project is almost a blank slate with Dorn Cox's name on it. I mean, that's just the truth. So that's why I'm excited about collaborating with you. One, I think we need to do the big heavy lift for fundraising before we can start focusing on that piece. But obviously keep these conversations going. You are in it, so we can find out what kind of funding we have. Two, the idea of, we have a lot of skeptics out there about soil carbon being a real solution to climate change and being able to control how much is being stored. Like, how much can you really pull down in what space of time? How fast can you build up soil? You know, there's lots of folks who have ideas that this is just impossible. This is not a big solution. So we want to do the science for that. And because of that, we want to make sure we use very conventional methods of measurement that are very well accepted amongst that skeptical community in the science community, so they can't diss us on our methods. So there's a basis of our work. It's got to be just like right in line with what's being done. So we're vetting, we're getting meetings with as many sort of skeptical or even open-minded, but various scientists around the country presenting what we're doing, and have them push back to make sure we've got the best methods so that we don't get slammed by the methods, and then the soil itself will tell the story. That all said, the citizen science work is so new, we won't be basing our work on citizen science work, but it seems like with the work we're going to be doing, wouldn't it be a great place to start citizen science work on top of the work we're doing? That's how I'm thinking about it right now. And Amanda, you've been thinking about this a lot, so why don't you chime in?
Yeah. So I guess I'll start with people who don't know what our project is. We're doing a 30-year analysis of what we found to be 100 of the most impactful climate solutions. And one of the big things that we're finding from our very kind of initial reports, we don't know what it's going to say in the end, is that food systems are just as important as renewable energy for solving the climate crisis. We don't know exactly how it's going to stack up, but our goal is to do this analysis of 100 solutions and add up their financial and their greenhouse gas impact potential over the next 30 years, considering a pretty aggressive rate of adoption. And we're also looking at ecosystem services and jobs growth numbers and health and that sort of thing. Those aren't as easy to add up and create an integrated model with. So our integrated model is largely the financial and greenhouse gas components. And we're taking more of a meta-analysis approach, so just taking what is the best available information out there now. We're not going out and doing the data collection right now. But we kind of want to release this data and from there build from it. And we love the idea of citizen science and being able to make this data better and better and better as we go along, but kind of giving us this starting point of looking at across the biochar field and all the meta-analyses there, what's kind of the general consensus of the financial and greenhouse gas potential impact of these solutions, and with that piece of it, we're being conservative. So like, what's the conservative greenhouse gas potential of an acre of biochar? Where we're not being as conservative, we're being aggressive with the adoption path. So we're kind of trying to show what we call the optimistically plausible future. But hopefully, if we're attacked on our numbers, it's that. Actually it could be even better than what you're saying in terms of the actual, per ton impact or per unit of adoption impact. But we're going to be putting it out there in an open source fashion next year, and one on our book, but doing a website called Drawdown Interactive, and there'll be a lot of potential for people to add to the data sets and play with it, and it'll be more of like a wiki-like approach for people to grow from it. And in terms of our audiences, we're looking pretty broadly. Farmers and land managers are, one of our core 8 audiences, but we also have data visualizers and artists that we're concentrating on, policymakers and advocates, investors and philanthropists, school children and teachers, engaged citizens and activists, and business and entrepreneurs as well. So, and academics and researchers, the final one. So it's kind of like saying everyone by saying 8 different categories, but we are concentrating on those specific people and trying to make sure that we have artists and philanthropists and everyone paying attention to this data and building visualizations, their own scenarios of the future, and most importantly, decision-making tools based on this research. So that's what we're thinking.
How many people work at Project Drawdown now?
We have, we just started our second fellowship program, so now we're a total of 36.
And when you start publishing, is it going to be a tsunami or a steady rain? It's going to be a tsunami.
Yeah, we'll be doing a little bit of teaser content for the Paris climate negotiations, but a large part of what we're doing is adding it all up, what we call the cash register moment of adding up all the solutions that are available today and seeing, trying to shift that mindset of people feeling like it's not possible, that there's no way out of this mess, into actually there is if we add it all up. Because a lot of the kind of decarbonization scenarios, which I do not like the title of, really focus on energy and efficiency and don't look at regenerative agriculture or boosting reproductive rights or sharing economy or some of the other solutions that we're looking at that have great potential and are really hard to study. And there's a reason people haven't included them, because what word am I looking for? It's just hard to compare it with kind of energy numbers that have been studied well and have all of this background behind them.
With your biochar work, are you seeing a lot of science being done on the biochar? Because that's something we've been looking for. We'd love to get our hands on that.
Yeah, there's tons of biochar science out there, and quite a few meta-analyses too that have taken a lot of that research and put it all together.
And how's that looking? How are they dealing with the energy to produce it, the energy to move it, and then the solution? How's that looking?
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of the biochar research, like I think a lot of these, they draw the boundaries a little too narrow. That's kind of the thesis of what you guys are doing and doing this whole full systems analysis of it. Just because it's hard with a methodology to include everything in there. But the meta-analyses have included it all. I can send you some stuff.
Right. It just froze on the last thing you said on my system.
Oh, I said I'll send you some things.
Oh, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Peter, I'm curious, from this group, how are some of the other organizations, how would they best collaborate or support your efforts? What are the ways in which collaboration could really be supportive to help overcome some of the barriers that you've already identified?
Well, the barriers of skepticism is just, we're going to meet that with science and good storytelling, is all I can figure, and experience and real rancher success and real farmer success. So I think for everybody, just continuing telling these stories is going to be incredible. It's just going to work. It might feel like one-on-one conversations for a long time, but it's just going to work. So I think just on a personal level, like my Uncle Phil has been slow to come to all this, but as soon as I start talking about it makes financial sense. He's not worried about climate change, but he does see wasting money as a problem. And then when I show him wasting resources as wasting money, he's a climber. He's a mountain climber. So, you find the pieces to connect. That to me is huge for everybody. Talking about food health and soil health, just more and more people got to know about this stuff. Everyone I meet who I talk about soil health, it makes sense to them. It feels right. And so just keeping that conversation going and keeping it open-minded is something that everyone can do. Making sure that we listen to everybody. Because if you just sort of focus on the thing you disagree on, you'll never get to the fact that there's a great common ground piece. Our friends at GreenBiz have asked me to do some writing, and so that's my first article, is about that concept. I think it's going to go online next week or this week. I don't know. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm very excited. On the science itself, if you have expertise in one of these places, contact us and push back on our scientists on the methods they're going to use. We'll set up meetings. We're really doing that vetting process before we start. And we have the luxury of doing that because we're still fundraising. So if we had already raised all the money, we'd be out there doing it. So I'm taking advantage. It's an analogy I like to use to when you write a film script and someone gives you the money, you make the movie, but that script might not be ready yet, and that's how we get bad movies. And so I want the script for our science game plan to be really good, so we're working on that consistently. That kind of pushback and talking through what our scientists are doing is really helpful. And then with regards to the whole issue of open sourcing our data, how do we get it out there once we collect it? That's where I think this group is perfectly focused. Mm-hmm. And that's just going to be an ongoing conversation. For me, having preliminary conversations, knowing that methods are out there is really good. Getting people excited about that ahead of time is really good. I know that the folks in Colorado State are working with our with our friend from Shell, Christian Davies, the environmental scientist, and he's right there with them on helping the data we collect through a Million Tons project to feed right over there. So we want to be part of that whole modeling world, and so we want to make sure we're giving them data that they can use. So that's, again, part of the pre-production of our work. And then with Amanda, I mean, you guys are going to do such a great outreach. If anything we're doing feels like part of your, helping you tell the story, we'd love to collaborate on that. I mean, that's sort of where I focus as well. So, I mean, and you guys are going to do a great job. You just know that. And so that, to me, would be a place of collaboration that probably could start talking now. Because you guys
we're doing some storytelling around Paris, and it would be great to have, your camaraderie in that footage and helping frame it all.
Exactly, and we've got the film translated in Spanish, and we're doing the French translation now.
Great.
So we'll have those tools available. So I'd love to continue that conversation. There's a lot of folks talking about Paris right now.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting a lot of interest from different groups about the Million Tons project, and it might be that folks. So it's all just bubbling right now, moving parts.
Yeah. There's some people talking about putting together a coalition of kind of the regenerative economy, is how some people are talking about it, but basically putting carbon back where it belongs, reframing carbon. Yeah,
and the French are very, very vocal right now. They want solutions.
Yeah.
And so here we are talking about solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to be in that loop.
Excellent. And then, do you still need funding help? Can we help you with that?
Yeah, we do. I've sort of been looking for that big check to start us off, because this is not it's not cheap what we're doing. It's in that $10 to $14 million range to do all this science on all those ranches. So yes, we do need help fundraising. There's no question about that. We have been talking a while with Shell. We haven't given up at all. We're actually getting some nice momentum. But it just makes sense to keep talking to lots of other people. We think any company that's got a carbon conscience, I just thought of that. That's pretty good, actually. Any company that has that could be very interested in what we're doing, because it's not an offset, it's storage, and with all the benefits we all know. And so, I'd love to, absolutely, could use some help along those lines.
Peter, it also occurs to me, I was with Richard actually 2 weeks ago at the Soil Renaissance meeting, and they're talking about launching this Global Institute for the Advancement of Soil Health. And one of the first things that they're looking at tackling, and also raising funds for, putting some of their own in for, but is a global, U.S. assessment of soil health, which would cover the entire country. I would imagine that a lot of the protocols in that initiative would overlap significantly with the work that you're doing and could be leveraged. So I'm excited to see how that conversation, and a lot of the same issues with the researchers that they're looking to recruit on open access to the data, are coming along. And some of that's coming, I think, will move along with the funding when that's a criteria for the funding, that it's open access. So I think it's going to be really interesting, and also maybe a criteria coming as a condition of use from the farmer's perspective, if this is being generated at the farm level and being accessed at the farm, saying, look, we need feedback, so this data has to be at least published in a limited way so that we can have access to it for decision support purposes.
Now that's where I think there could be a lot of resistance from ranchers wanting their data released. And so I think that's actually, that piece right there is going to be, I think there's going to be a lot of research that's needed just to see what ranchers want up there and whether they want their personal soil data, like what's the benefit for them and what's the cost. I think we have to explore that. One of the things was, what if their insurance goes up because the insurance company is monitoring their soil and sees that it's dry, or, like that kind of thinking is I'm starting to hear things like that.
Well, I'm excited. I was just on a call this morning with the Sustainable Food Lab folks and their Cool Farm tool, and I'm excited to have them on to this group because they showed a little bit of a pilot project for data sharing, where they give a code to partners. Say a farmer fills out their data, and they give a code to say Unilever, and saying I give you permission to look at my data, and that has value, that code. And it was the beginning. It's I think we can go a lot further with it, but it's the beginning of this sort of conditional use and agreement for data coming from the farm level that they've already implemented at some limited level. And I see something like that moving forward.
Putting the power in the farmer's hands.
Yeah.
In the Jewish faith, up until the ring going on the woman's hand, it's up to her to either put her hand out or do that. Like up until the almost I do moment. So if the farmer has that control, that would be huge. And then of course the anonymous kind of, but what's going to happen is the data is going to be so geo-placed that there's really no anonymity for the farmer, because you're going to know exactly where they're at. That data is going to come from that spot on Earth.
Well, and that's something where at the modeler level and how it's publicized, and I think there can be some, we can pixelate it when it's actually published in different ways, so it's so that it's at the at the landscape level, at the kilometer or multiple kilometer level. But
do you see this as a funding stream for the farmers and ranchers, or
that from my perspective, yeah, I mean I do, because I think, and Abe, jump in here too, that data has a lot of value for the general public from an environmental service perspective, and there's effort that goes into collecting it beyond what would be agronomically valuable. So I really do think there is value and a potential funding source. I mean, what are you talking about with ecosystem services other than a stream of data that has? That is essentially what ecosystem services are. Is you're collecting data about what's going on in that system.
Yeah.
So yes.
It's very exciting, and I can just say again, I'm really glad you're focused on this, because it's so important, and we all can lift whatever we can lift. I definitely can't lift that. I'm glad you're focused on it, because we'll all benefit from it. There's no question. We'll all benefit from it. The way you just said, what is ecosystem services? It's data collection. You just put two totally different parts of my brain together on that. So thank you.
But I mean, I see that also bringing together some of these other initiatives with, like this new global soil health initiative, really should take some of the burden off of going deeper. The kind of projects that you're talking about. So I think it'd be exciting to sort of start to knit some of those together, and of course Richard's right in the middle of it. So
yeah, no, it's great.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah, he was talking to me. I had the opportunity to go down to this rainforest, Finca Luna Nueva, in Costa Rica. It was a food conference that Richard was at, and he was telling me about the soil carbon renaissance work, and it sounds really cool. And it sounds like they like what our team is proposing, because they're going to embed our films, and I think they're going to embed our 2-pager research proposal as well up on their site. And so they obviously love Richard. Richard's our principal investigator, so it's great.
Right.
It's really great.
One of the themes that came out of that for the research priorities was that we don't have enough data on on operations that are pushing the upper limits of potential for soil health, and soil carbon is a good piece of that. And also it came up is measuring deeper. So a lot of the pieces that you're hitting were coming up from a whole number of researchers coming out of that. They're separate but parallel process to what you're looking at.
That's
so
good.
That was pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, measuring a meter down, I just have to look at Wendy Silver for that. I mean, I don't know every paper that's ever been written, but she sure was. Seems like pushing that before a lot of other people were. And so, thank you, Wendy.
So we're heading towards the last few minutes of this conversation. I just want to open it up to any last comments or questions for Peter before we close out.
Thank you, Peter. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for doing what you all are doing. Awesome.
Yeah. It's Abe, so beautiful how we're all supporting one another and how we found each other. Nice. It feels less lonely.
Yeah, exactly. That's what the scientists on my team, I mean, they're having more fun right now than they've had in a long time because they're a part of a team. They've said that exactly to me.
Yeah.
Like even Richard, this is fun, and he's been fighting for decades out there in Texas.
Yeah.
Now having fun. I mean, I'm a filmmaker who's curious, and the fact that this team could have an impact on Richard that quickly, that's just such a joy right there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it'll be very joyful when we get out in the field and start digging cores and doing all the work.
Yeah. I think it's like a micro story of this larger story of the climate movement, which is becoming a lot more, hopefully, through our work, enchanted with carbon and realizing that carbon is life and moving away from that really angsty, rage-filled, victimized, demonizing carbon kind of feel. That's the vibe right now.
Yeah,
well, we get to be part of this path that's towards solutions and towards life. So much more fun.
Focusing on solutions it's changed my life with Carbon Nation, and it just feels a hell of a lot better. And so yeah, I'm right there with you.
Great.
Here. So Peter, next week we'll have Heather Darby, who will be presenting Go Crop for week 11, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to be one of these tools providing feedback on nutrient management and making this process, as Abe said, providing immediate feedback for land management. So looking forward to that, and looking forward to have Abe present sometime here coming up too.
Awesome.
And we'll look forward to seeing you all in the coming weeks. I guess I'll mention also that we're talking about starting the synthesis process for these workshops as we head into August and September, and hosting some of the more grouping some of these core conversations that we've sort of hit on just a little bit over these first 11 weeks, or will soon to be 14 or more weeks. Bringing those together into some more managed conversations, some of which I think we'll do on air, and some of which we'll have off air, and then really looking forward to bringing a group together in person to really bring this together. So excited to see this process mature.
Yeah.
May I give a little plug for our friends at the Grass-Fed Exchange? They've got a conference coming up in Michigan. Was it the 17th and 18th? 16th, 17th, and 18th, I believe, up in northern Michigan. It's really an amazing conference. I've gone the last 2 years. If you want to learn about any kind of this type of grazing, it's a great place to go. And Abe, obviously, you'll be there.
I second that.
Absolutely.
Cheers, everybody.
All right.
Cheers, everybody. Thanks for another great week. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.